The mute girl was dragged into a grove by a group of men, and was tied to a chair. Some people stood around her, making strange noises. They seemed to be performing a kind of ritual. When the girl struggled, she stabbed a bloody hole in one of the kidnappers in the neck. The scent of blood attracted a pack of monsters. Her partners were torn to shreds, while the remaining kidnappers cheered on the monsters. The girl slipped away by the chance, and she didn't know that the monsters were following her. Now, the world had been overrun by monsters. These monsters could hunt humans by scent and sound. People could only communicate through sign language for surviving. But the danger wasn't just from the monsters, and there were also cultists hunting their people to sacrifice to the monsters. In this time, Yaz and her boyfriend struggled to survive. Even though they were shivering with cold, they dared not light a fire. They feared it would attract the attention of monsters or cultists. One day, Yaz and her boyfriend were walking in the woods. She gave her boyfriend a bracelet she had made. Her boyfriend was so happy, and they embraced, enjoying this brief moment of joy. Suddenly, a series of whistles echoed from afar. They immediately became alert. Their long time on the run had made them experienced. That was a signal among the cultists. They decided to split up and run to avoid being caught. The boyfriend took the initiative to run out and draw the enemies away. Yaz ran in the opposite direction. She weaved through the forest. She didn't know how long she had been running, when she suddenly encountered a man ahead. The man rushed forward attempting to catch Yaz. Yaz turned around and ran away. She collided with the man's partners. They caught her and dragged her away. Yaz found out that her boyfriend had also been caught. Neither of them could break free from the cultists' restraints. They were despairingly forced into different vehicles. Yaz was locked in the trunk. She tried to free herself, but the trunk was locked. Yaz couldn't open it. She gradually gave up struggling. The vehicle stopped after arriving at a place. The cultists brought Yaz to a space. The area was scattered with rocks and small hills. There was a tree stump in the center, like a site for some kind of sacrificial ritual. Yaz was bound to the tree stump. The female leader of the cultists took out a razor. She ignored Yaz's pleading eyes, cut Yaz's calf, bleeding instantly. Yaz instantly understood that they intended to attract the monsters with the scent of blood. Then they planned to use Yaz as a sacrifice to feed the monsters. The scent of blood seemed to attract the monsters. With a strong wind blew through the woods, the cultists retreated to a nearby hill. They turned their backs, waiting for the monsters to arrive. Suddenly, a series of roars echoed through the air. The monsters were approaching, drawn in by the scent. Yaz trembled in fear. Through the gaps in the forest, she saw a strange figure approaching her. It was a monster with twisted limbs and a pitch-black body. The cultists were very excited, but Yaz, about to be eaten, felt unhappy. She struggled fiercely and freed her right hand before the monster arrived. Yaz was so excited. Just as she was about to free her another hand, a cultist noticed her movement. He rushed over and held Yaz. During their struggle, Yaz pierced the cultist's neck with a piece of wood. Blood gushed from the cultist's neck. He covered the wound on his neck and stumbled a few steps. The next second, he was tackled by the monster. The monster tore the cultist's flesh, savoring the sacrifice. The other cultists heard the crunching sounds and thought Yaz was eaten. They cheered excitedly. They didn't notice that one of their own was missing. Yaz saw the bloody scene and tried his effort to free herself from the stump. She ran away ignoring the pain in her leg. After the ritual ended, the remaining cultists found the stump empty. They approached in confusion, only to see a partner being dragged away by the monster. Yaz didn't stop running until she was exhausted. She found a small stream and rinsed her leg briefly. Thinking of her missing boyfriend, Yaz was extremely worried about him. She decided to rest for a moment before going to rescue him, so she applied some herbs to her leg and wrapped the wound simply with a strip of cloth. The monster approached Yaz, her heart racing. She dared not make noise and hid in a cave. She calmed her breathing, and thankful that she had cleaned her wound, the monster peered into the cave, but left when it didn't smell blood. Once the monster left, Yaz immediately set out to rescue her boyfriend. She followed the tire tracks on the ground to find the cultists' camp. Yaz hid behind a tree to observe the situation inside. There was a guard at the gate, so she had to find another way in. She found a gap on the side of the camp, and she went through the gap. She moved noiselessly, avoiding the guard's sight while searching for her boyfriend. Yaz accidentally made noise a few times, but the guards ignored it. While hiding behind a car, she found a bracelet. It was the bracelet she had given her boyfriend, and he might have been killed. At that moment, the group that had kidnapped Yaz returned. The female leader pulled aside the curtain of a tent, and gently covered an elderly person inside with a blanket. Yaz guessed that it was the leader's mother. Then the leader walked into the small room. The walls of the room were covered with strange drawings, the largest depicting a mother holding a child. A group of people was piously praying to the woman in white on the platform. Hearing the door open, the woman in white turned around. In this dangerous world, she was actually a pregnant woman about to give birth. Upon learning that the ritual had failed, the pregnant woman slapped the leader across the face. Yaz hid beneath the floorboards and watched. She made noise, and the woman in white became alert. She ordered the leader to go and search. Yaz shrank behind her cover, trying hard to minimize her presence. She watched the leader's feet walk away, thinking she had fooled her. Just as she let out a sigh of relief, she suddenly sensed that something was off. The female chief acted agilely. She crawled toward to grab Yaz's neck, and Yaz tried her best to push her away. Yaz took the opportunity to escape. Unexpectedly, all the cultists had returned to the camp. Now there was full of people outside, and Yaz would be discovered by just a small mistake. She could only hide as best as she could. Unfortunately, the female leader soon awakened. She rang the alarm of the camp. She informed her companions that someone had intruded. The cultists responded to the signal, ringing the instruments in their hands. Everyone dropped what they were doing to pursue Yaz. A male cultist discovered Yaz's trail. The man ran quickly, and as Yaz was about to escape the camp, he grabbed her leg. There were sharp spikes on the wire, but the man seemed not to feel any pain. However, Yaz struggled harder and harder, finally managing to break free. The female leader shot at Yaz, but only hit a nearby tree trunk. Yaz ran from day into night, not daring to stop. She was hungry and exhausted, and her steps grew heavy. She was about to collapse by the roadside. Completely unaware of her hands, she had injured herself while pulling on the wire, and the wound was bleeding. Soon, the monster was attracted by the scent of blood. Yaz hurriedly ran away. She weaved through the forest in the darkness, about to exhaust her energy. Suddenly, the monster tripped over a branch beneath its feet. Yaz took the opportunity to run faster, and finally shook off the monster. She reached the road just as a car approached. Yaz trusted no one, but the man who got out of the car beckoned her to come along. The man could speak normally, asking his questions as he drove, but Yaz couldn't understand and couldn't respond. She showed the man the scar on her throat, likely left from birth. The man showed a hint of pity. Just as Yaz let her guard down, a bullet pierced his skull, killing him instantly. The cultists had still found Yaz. The vehicle lost control and crashed into a wall, the impact leaving Yaz dizzy. She struggled to stay conscious, and crawled out of the car. She saw a cultist lying on the ground, struggling. It turned out that they had also been hit by the car. Yaz lunged at the cultist, grappling with him. The two rolled down the hillside, but the cultist had a gun, and Yaz couldn't overpower him and tried to escape. Yaz was knocked to the ground by them. The cultist choked Yaz, rendering her immobile, but Yaz managed to grab the cultist's gun, and aimed at his head. Pulling the trigger, she successfully shot the cultist dead. After escaping danger, Yaz didn't dare to stay in one place. She moved her body to flee. The long escape and hunger had drained her energy. Fortunately, she had captured the cultist's gun, and she had a weapon for self-defense now. Now, the only motivation keeping her going was to find her boyfriend. After walking for an unknown amount of time, Yaz suddenly saw a light ahead. This indicated that someone had made a fire up ahead. Worried that it might be the cultists, Yaz approached cautiously. To her surprise, she found her boyfriend sitting by the campfire. She quickly ran towards him. Upon seeing Yaz, her boyfriend shook his head, signaling her not to come closer. Yaz was too overjoyed to see this. As she ran across a patch of grass, she was caught in a trap and hung up. It turned out that her boyfriend was bait set by the cultists. Seeing Yaz captured, her boyfriend was anxious, but he was pinned to a tree and could do nothing. The cultists looked on triumphantly at the two of them. Yaz was suspended from the tree, unable to move. She watched as the cultists knocked her boyfriend unconscious. Suddenly, the wind picked up in the woods, accompanied by a series of roars. Yaz knew this was the signal of the monster's arrival. She became even more anxious, and if the monsters came, both she and her boyfriend would surely die. The cultists grew alert as well. Looking around with their guns, Yaz tried to loosen the ropes around her legs, but accidentally tore her palm wound. Blood flowed down her hand. Taking advantage of the moment, when the cultist was being devoured by the monster, Yaz pulled on the ropes and climbed onto a branch. The cultist tried to escape, but the scent of blood attracted 3 monsters. He was powerless to defend himself. He was cruelly torn apart by the monsters, their feeding method extremely savage. Yaz crouched in the tree, watching as the cultist's skull was ripped. She was too frightened to move. Suddenly, several monsters noticed Yaz's boyfriend beneath the tree. They approached, and her boyfriend's hands were pinned to the tree. Unable to escape, Yaz was anxious. She wanted to go down to save her boyfriend, but one of the monsters had already seen Yaz, and was climbing the tree, trying to get closer to her. Yaz struggled to evade the monster's pursuit. Her boyfriend knew he was about to be eaten, but still gave Yaz a reassuring smile. Yaz felt helpless as she watched her boyfriend being dragged away by 2 monsters. She forced herself to endure the heartache, and broke the rope around her feet. At that moment, the monster caught up to Yaz, opening its mouth wide. Yaz took the opportunity to tie the rope around the monster's neck, then jumped down from the tree while holding the other end. In this way, the monster was hanged from the tree. Yaz fell to the ground and she was alive. But she was not happy. Her boyfriend was gone. She hated the cultists even more than the monsters. Yaz decided to take revenge. She picked up the gun from the ground and walked towards the cultists' camp. She reached the vicinity of her destination. Yaz first hid behind a tree and observed for a while. Then she blew the cultists' signal whistle. The cultists, hearing the whistle, thought a companion had returned and hurried out to check. Taking advantage of the guard's absence, Yaz slipped back into the camp through the same spot. She remembered that the pregnant woman in the small house was important to the cultists. She carefully approached the small house with gun and pushed the door in. She discovered that the room contained only the pregnant woman. The pregnant woman saw the fierce Yaz, but did not show any fear. She placed her hand gently on her belly. Yaz stared at her belly, her expression turning uncertain. She hesitated to act. Unexpectedly, the pregnant woman took advantage of Yaz hesitating to knock the gun from her hand. Then she grabbed a frying pan and struck Yaz hard, knocking her out. Before losing consciousness, Yaz scratched the pregnant woman, her nails staining with the woman's blood. When Yaz opened her eyes again, she felt a pulling sensation. She was being dragged away by the cultists again. The cultists smeared her face with blood, and then tossed her into a coffin, attempting to bury her alive. When Yaz regained consciousness, she found the coffin's top sealed with wooden planks, and the sound of dirt being piled on was continuous. The light before her gradually faded, and Yaz felt both despair and anger. Suddenly, she noticed a light beneath her feet, along with a small opening next to it. It was clearly left by the cultists. Yaz didn't understand their intentions, but staying in one place would surely lead to her death. In order to find a way out, she crawled inside. The tunnel was long and dark. The further Yaz went, the more uneasy she felt, sensing something watching her from the shadows. It turned out that the cultists had simply chosen a different method to sacrifice her. Yaz quickly backed away to evade the monster's pursuit, but the only exit was blocked. With nowhere left to retreat, Yaz could only watch as the monster approached her. The monster soon crawled right in front of Yaz, opening its mouth wide. Strangely, it did not try to eat her immediately, but kept sniffing her, as if she had a scent that could tame it. Yaz immediately remembered that, during her struggle with the pregnant woman, she had gotten the woman's blood on her. Recalling the strange drawings on the walls of the small house, Yaz suddenly understood. Perhaps the child in the pregnant woman's belly could control these monsters. The monster backed away from the coffin, and Yaz watched this miraculous scene. Formulating a plan in her mind, she dug out a hole and crawled out. Yaz walked toward the cultists' camp, her expression colder than ever. At that moment, the cultists in the camp were unaware that there would be vengeance on. They were hugging friends and family, celebrating the successful completion of the ritual. The female leader pulled aside the curtain of the tent, and gently stroked her mother's cheek. Then, she walked to the small house to check on the pregnant woman. Before they would communicating, a commotion suddenly erupted outside. The female leader hurried outside, and saw her mother's tent engulfed in flames. She let out a heart-wrenching scream. She tried to rush in to save her mother, but was stopped by her companions. She could only watch when her mother was burned alive. After that, the entire camp turned into a sea of flames. Not only that, but the cultists were falling one by one. It was Yaz hiding in the shadows, shooting them one by one. As the cultists watched their friends and family die one by one, they finally felt Yaz's pain. The female leader saw the chaos, and tried to get up to restore order, but Yaz shot her in the abdomen, killing her. A man, witnessing his wife's death, went mad and chased Yez with his gun. All he could see was the firelight. Yez continued to make noise, taunting him. The man roared in anger, standing in place. Suddenly, the man heard a noise from the corner. He thought he had found Yez and hurried there, ready to take revenge. When he got there, he found that the person lying on the ground was one of his own companions. Yez killed everyone in the camp, leaving only one pregnant woman. She picked up a knife and walked into the small house. Unexpectedly, the pregnant woman was extremely fierce. As soon as Yez entered, she was met with a fierce attack. Her weapon was knocked away, and she had to dodge the pregnant woman's strikes. Yez was cornered against the wall. The pregnant woman pressed Yaz's head towards the blade. Yez, taking the opportunity to kick the pregnant woman, and temporarily escaped danger. She lunged at the pregnant woman and bit her neck. She bit down hard enough to tear off a piece of flesh, blood gushing from the pregnant woman's neck. At that moment, the pregnant woman would give birth. In the heat of the struggle, she overexerted and was about to give birth, but Yez would no longer melt. When she was about to take this chance to kill her, she didn't realize the female leader was still alive. Seeing the pregnant woman was in danger, she rushed into the small house to grapple with Yez. The female leader fired several shots at Yez. She glanced at the bed, and saw the pregnant woman giving birth. Freezing in place, taking advantage of her distraction, Yez tackled the female leader. Yez was beaten down and couldn't get up. To protect the pregnant woman's delivery, the female leader pulled out a razor to kill Yez. Yez acted first and knocked her out. She quickly grabbed a kitchen knife and slashed at her neck. At this time, the sound of a baby's cry echoed. It seemed the pregnant woman had successfully given birth. Blood gushed from the female leader's neck, yet she smiled contentedly. Yez stood in place, unsure of how to handle the mother and the baby. At the same time, the pregnant woman frantically got off the bed. She stared at her child in terror, and her expression mixed of despair and fear. Then she ended her own life. The world changed in an instant. A strong wind swept through the dense forest, and countless monsters rushed toward the small house. It was as if they had been summoned. Yez slowly approached the bed, watching the baby that had frightened her mother to death. Then, Yez cradled the baby in her arms. The monsters entered the small house like pilgrims. They did not attack Yez, but they cheered as if welcoming a new king. Yez looked at the baby in her arms, which was a demon with a goat's head and a human body. The demon regarded Yez as its mother, and was very dependent on her. Yez savored the feeling of being able to control everything, a victorious smile spreading across her face. This film can be viewed as a religious horror movie. What's unique is that there are almost no lines throughout the entire film. The plot is entirely driven by the characters' actions and behaviors, maximizing the eerie silence required in a horror film. The viewing experience is quite thrilling, and the revenge scenes are sharp and decisive. However, some scenes are overly gruesome. If you enjoy my channel, please click subscribe.